When you are hearing those particular sounds, which are the sounds of the hull itself under great stress, that's alarming. You just never know when it's going to fail, but it is a certainty that it will fail.
What if the truth hiding in the depths was far darker than we ever imagined? AI has just completed its most advanced scan yet of the Titan submarine wreck, and the results are nothing short of chilling.
Why the strange-looking craft, on a mission to the wreck of the Titanic, catastrophically imploded.
From twisted metal that tells an untold story to hidden details experts missed, this isn't the disaster you thought you knew. Stick with us until the end. What you're about to learn will leave you stunned. Number 10. A digital dive like no other. When officials went back to the Titan wreck site in 2025, they had a lot more advanced technology than they had used the first time. Instead of remotely controlled cars driven by people, they used AI submersibles that could do everything on their own. Laser-based 3D mapping, advanced sonar, and machine learning were all used by these tools to make an accurate digital model of the seabed. Sonar tracked things that were hidden in the sand or shadows, while the lasers moved across the ocean floor in grids that overlapped. An AI built into the scanner took data from each pass and quickly put it all together to make a very accurate 3D map. From the start, it was clear that this footage had an edge over the footage from 2023. Human-piloted ROVs could only stay on site for a short time because of the weather and the cost of running them, so they had to work quickly and sometimes missed small details. The 2025 AI subs, on the other hand, could move slowly without worrying about pilots getting tired or running out of air. They stayed on site for days at a time and scanned the same places more than once from different angles. They were able to record textures and forms down to a few hundredths of a millimeter. Working in complete darkness was another problem that AI was better at solving than people. Light doesn't go very far at 3,800 meters below the surface, so cameras by themselves weren't very useful. The AI system didn't need light to work. Instead, it used LiDAR-style laser pulses that bounced off objects and gave accurate readings of distances. When AI was given sonar data, it built solid models of trash, even ones that were buried under layers of silt. This new video was so clear that engineers could see tiny cracks and scoring marks that weren't visible in the old film. The self-driving submarines also had devices that could learn on their own. As they got more information, they learned to focus on places that were most likely to have new hints, like places where the sonar echoes were not normal, or where the texture of the seabed changed quickly. Because of this adaptive scanning, not a single pass was lost. If the AI found something that didn't belong, it could go back and scan again from a different point right away. It had mapped a much bigger and more detailed area by the end of the mission than any other try. What the latest scan uncovered in the wreck's deepest sections rewrites everything experts believed about the Titan's doomed descent. Number 9. A site frozen in time. The 2025 mapping by the AI showed that Titan's wreckage was spread out over a much bigger area than investigators had thought. As of 2023, the pieces of the Titanic were thought to be limited to a small field near the bow. The new scan showed pieces that were hundreds of meters longer, and sometimes buried under decades of sediment on the seabed. The large range of pieces shows that the implosion may have had even more force than thought, sending smaller pieces flying in all directions. It also explains why earlier searches failed to find some parts that were lost. One of the most shocking discoveries was that the Titanic's rusticles had tiny pieces of metal stuck in them. These rusticles, which are flimsy, icicle-like structures made of bacteria that eat iron, had carbon fiber, wiring, and even tiny pieces of titanium stuck inside them. This means that the shock wave from the implosion sent pieces of the Titanic straight into its breaking structure. Some of these pieces may have been stuck there since the day of the accident, making them a permanent part of the famous wreck. Such fine-scale scanning by the AI would not have been possible without the finding. Over the past 2 years, the currents at the wreck site have been pretty calm. This has kept many parts of the scene in almost perfect shape. AI images showed that whole parts were still resting in the same place they landed in June 2023, not moved by the water. Even the marks that some panels left on the bottom can still be seen. Small pieces of refuse are slowly being hidden from view as sand settles on top of them in some places. Because of this time capsule effect, scientists could study the spot just as it was after the implosion. The new data also showed signs of movement that happened months after the disaster. Some pieces seem to have moved slightly, which could be because deep-sea life interacted with them or because of small changes in the current. AI found paths in the sediment that led away from heavy debris, which suggests that the sediment slowly slid downhill. Even though these changes are small, they show how important it is to quickly record the spot before nature erases important details. The position of each piece tells us something about the forces that caused the implosion. The scan gave us new information about the link between where the debris is located and how the structure fails. Some panels that are far from the main wreck have clean edges, which means they came off early in the collapse process. Others that are closer to the pressure tank are bent and warped, which suggests they stayed in place until the end. Researchers can learn more about how Titan failed in its last few milliseconds by drawing this pattern across the spot. Without the accuracy of AI mapping, it would have been impossible to get this kind of forensic information. Number 8. The hull story retold by AI. The 2025 AI scans found designs on the carbon fiber hull's surface that had never been seen before. Some pieces had tiny peaks and waves, which are called microbuckling. Each one was a unique mark of how the material broke when it was pushed too hard. These shapes were too small for cameras to see in 2023, but the sub-millimeter 3D models made them clear. They were able to see where the buckling started and how it spread by comparing different parts of the hull. With this map, they were able to figure out the order of events leading up to the collapse. The information suggests that the structure failed in 2 stages rather than all at once. It's possible that localized stress caused a piece of carbon fiber to separate and curve inward during the first stage. A few milliseconds later, the failure spread to the rest of the body, which caused the terrible implosion. Before this discovery, people thought that the Titan's loss was a single, immediate event. It also helps explain why the debris is spread out in different places. The uneven fall may have sent things flying out at slightly different speeds and angles. The 2-stage failure was shown by models of the pressure pattern that were run on the AI's 3D hull model. The shapes of the cracks were similar to what happens when something breaks and sends out a quick shockwave, followed by a final fall. There are clean shear breaks in some parts of the hull and crushed, accordion-like bends in others. The times before and after the main implosion are shown by these changes. Without AI recording each curve and tear in exact 3D space, this level of detail would not have been possible to see. The finding also brings up new questions about what happened in the last few seconds for those on board. A quick, localized rupture could have caused a loud crack before the fatal fall. This sound is different from the shock that is quiet during a single-stage implosion. There might have been enough time in the sub for people to notice that there was less than 1/10 of a second between the 2 events. If that's the case, the AI's reconstruction not only showed how the hull failed, but it also gave us a glimpse into how people felt during the accident. Another important thing to think about is how this micro-buckling affects the long-term behavior of carbon fiber in deep-sea environments. The scan shows that water getting into the fibers over time may have made them weaker in some places than others, leaving them open to damage. These weak spots seem to have had something to do with starting the first break. Figuring out this pattern of failure could change how future deep-sea ships are made, especially those made of hybrid materials. Number 7. The ghost fragments. The AI scan showed a secret part of the disaster. Hundreds of pieces of debris that were too small for earlier searches to find. There were ones that were as small as sand grains and ones that were as big as coins. These pieces were spread out far from the main debris field. Some were buried in the ocean bottom, while others got caught in the Titanic's falling apart parts. Based on where they are, it looks like they were thrown out at very high speeds during the detonation. People-operated cams couldn't see this micro-debris field. It was only visible in the AI's very detailed maps. Copper wires from the sub's electrical equipment were melted and mixed in with these pieces. Heat marks on the sides showed that they were exposed to very high temperatures, most likely from the implosion's fast compression and release of energy. The AI also found pieces of burned titanium from the end caps and support structures. There were carbon and other residues on these splinters, which suggests that chemical processes happened in the chaos. These chemical fingerprints are very important for figuring out what the sub was like inside in its last moments. Because the AI was so accurate, scientists were able to organize these pieces without damaging them. Many of them are so fragile that trying to pull them off the bottom of the ocean would kill them right away. Instead, they can now be studied digitally, which keeps their state just as it was found. Also, this method lowers the chance of changing the spot, which is still useful for forensics. In a way, the AI has turned the tiniest and most fragile pieces of evidence into a permanent, interactive archive. Some of the ghost fragments revealed things about the implosion process that were not expected. For instance, melted plastic from parts inside the ship was found about 200 meters from the main wreck. This means that the blast wave probably went a lot farther with light materials than with heavy metal parts. These kinds of results help improve theories of how forces were distributed during the implosion. By looking at how different materials moved, experts can more accurately figure out how the sub's interior broke down. Chemical residue patterns on some fragments led to another interesting finding. AI spectral analysis found lithium traces, which most likely came from broken battery devices. The battery compartment may have been one of the first places that was broken into because of where these remains were found in relation to the rest of the wreck. This backs up the idea that several systems failed quickly one after the other instead of all at once. These ghost pieces, which have been missed up until now, may hold the last clues to how the Titan's materials and systems broke down. New analysis of the wreckage reveals patterns suggesting something far more complex than a simple catastrophic implosion. Number 6. The personal echoes left behind. The AI scan showed shapes on the ocean floor that were different from the wreck's metal pieces. These were things with clear shapes that looked like personal items that sank with the Titan. One scan showed a bent metal frame that looked like the body of a watch. The cover was missing, but the round shape was still there. In a different picture, broken cases that looked like small digital cameras were shown. Each find was carefully recorded, and 3D models made by AI kept their place before currents changed it. One of the most interesting finds was a bright angular object that was partly buried in dirt. It looked a lot like a Rubik's Cube, which could be a link to Suleiman Dawood, who was known to have brought one on the trip. Even though it hasn't been proven yet, the cube-shaped pattern stands out in the otherwise uneven field of trash. The finding has led to careful analysis to avoid making a mistaken identification. AI is now comparing the object's sizes to known cube sizes. If it turns out to be real, it would be one of the few direct personal items digitally rescued from the wreck. Because of their materials and where they were when the impact happened, these things were able to stay together. Things like tough plastics, metal watch cases, and small mechanical parts can handle shock better than bigger, softer things. A lot of people were protected by layers of sand that quickly settled after the disaster and kept them in place. Others were caught in safe areas among the pieces of the wreckage, away from the strong currents. The AI maps show that in the deep, staying alive is often more about luck than power. The extreme cold and pressure at the wreck site are another thing that has helped them stay alive. These conditions slow down the breakdown of chemicals and stop living things from breaking down the materials. So, even though they haven't been touched in almost 2 years, the items still look a lot like they did right after the accident. This has given researchers a rare chance to look at personal items that are still very much like they were when they were first found. Like a double-edged sword, these finds are both a reminder of the people they've lost and a real link to them. Number 5. Traces of the unthinkable. Chemical imaging was used to look for molecule fingerprints on the wreckage, so the AI scans went beyond what could be seen. The machine found faint signs of organic matter fused into several carbon fiber panels. The chemical makeup of nanogram-level human remains found in previous missions matched these readings. The AI devices were so sensitive that they could find things thousands of times smaller than before. It turned out that signs of life were deeper in the wreck than was thought before. These results confirmed what other data had already shown, that the implosion's huge amount of energy destroyed almost all living things. What's left is not tissue that can be seen, but microscopic chemical residue that is stuck to the sub's structural threads. The AI's scans showed that these leftovers followed the shapes of cracks and surfaces that had been damaged by heat. In other words, they were dropped when the sub broke apart, carried by the same forces that tore it apart. The forensic patterning helps us learn more about how matter acts in such harsh environments. The discovery has also brought up new ethics questions for experts and families. Some people say that these traces should be taken as part of the investigation, while others say that they shouldn't be touched out of respect. To get to the wreck, you would have to scrape or cut into it, which could damage it and make it harder to preserve. Leaving the things that are there turns the spot into a marine burial. The choice is important because it affects how wreck sites may be handled in the future when there are signs of people. The fact that AI can find such small remains makes us rethink what it means to heal. In past disasters, pieces of bodies could be used to identify the bodies, but here, the proof can't be seen. These chemical fingerprints might still hold genetic material, but it would be hard to get it out of deep-sea fused composites. It is now possible to try, but doing so makes the families worry about their safety and consent. None of the sides agree on whether to move forward at this point. Number 4. The implosion's aftershock. AI sonar records from the 2025 scan showed a clear, sharp sound event that happened a few seconds after the main explosion. By putting together the patterns of the sound waves, scientists were able to find the source, the titanium end caps, which probably broke apart during the fall and hit the seabed. The hit made a low-frequency pulse that was strong enough to move through the field of debris around it. This secondary event caused a small but measurable change in the way the debris and silt were arranged. This new information adds to the timeline of the disaster and shows that after the implosion, there was a heavy effect that happened later. The AI mapping of the material backs up the idea that this aftershock wasn't just noise, but a real event with important effects. Some of the pieces that have been found have compression lines and dent patterns that match the end cap's shape. The collision's force may have broken more of the hull, which was already weak from the detonation. This might explain why some pieces of the wreckage look worse than others, even though they are made of the same materials. These kinds of discoveries connect the sonar data directly to the bodies. The aftershock also helps explain the strange way the debris was arranged under the Titanic's hull. AI scans showed that small pieces of Titan were stuck in cracks in the older shipwreck, which would have been hard to get to without a strong, focused impact. Most likely, when the end caps hit the bottom, they sent a pressure wave and a plume of debris outward and upward. This upward force could have pushed lighter pieces into the interior of the Titanic. This chain of events would have been just a guess without the accurate sound mapping. It's important to understand the aftershock because it changes how the physics of the detonation are seen. Usually, these kinds of events are thought to stop right away with a total collapse. But in this case, the sequence went on for seconds. Those extra seconds let heavy parts of the structure move on their own and interact with the sea floor in ways that were not predicted. This changes past ideas about how submersibles fail, and it could help designers make better submersibles in the future, so that damage doesn't keep happening after the first one fails. It also shows how AI's precise timing can find things that camera footage can't show. The last piece of the puzzle doesn't just answer questions, it raises new ones that are far more unsettling. Number 3. Safety failures, written in metal. The bolted dome piece was scanned by the AI, which showed details that previous surveys had missed. Longer bolt holes along the connection ring showed that the bolts had been moving over time while being loaded. When mechanical force is applied over and over, like during multiple deep dives, this kind of stretching happens slowly over time. AI figured out that the deformation probably started a long time before the deadly dive by comparing the shape and wear of these holes to engineering models. This shows that there was a problem with the structure that was never fixed. The fracture lines on other parts did not match the new jagged breaks from the collapse. Instead, sea exposure smoothed out and darkened these older cracks, which means they were there before Dive 88. It became weaker even before the final fall, because some of these cracks went through important load-bearing areas. With AI's 3D model, it was possible to see how these small cracks could have worked as fault lines when the pressure suddenly increased. When the ship was put under too much stress, these old injuries would have made it fall apart faster. The finding fits with reports from insiders that Titan had damage that could be seen and was still there from earlier expeditions. People who used to work there said that danger signs like strange noises and obvious wear and tear were ignored or played down. The data from AI now shows that these warnings were not without reason. Long bolt holes and old crack marks are signs that the vessel has been used past its safe service life. This forensic evidence supports calls for tighter safety rules in deep-sea tourism. In earlier accounts, it wasn't mentioned that the wear patterns weren't all the same. AI discovered that some bolts and ship parts were under more stress than the same parts on the other side. This imbalance suggests that the load isn't being spread out evenly, which could be because of small mistakes made during assembly or warping from earlier dives. This may have caused some parts to be under more stress than they were meant to handle over time. The room for mistake had almost disappeared by the last dive. Number 2. The things we missed in 2023. There were tight limits on the length of dives, camera battery life, and oxygen supplies for support teams on the first ROV missions in 2023. They only had a few hours to get as much data as they could before they had to go back to the surface because of bad weather. To do this, they had to quickly scan big areas, often at lower resolutions, and paying less attention to small patterns. People were also tired, and looking at hours of footage that all looks the same makes it easy for small things to blend in with the background. Because of this, many small things were missed. In 2025, AI's method got rid of all of those problems. Self-driving subs could stay on site for days and take pictures with very high quality from many angles. The images were then put together into a seamless 3D model of the whole place by machine learning algorithms. This meant that experts could walk around the debris from all sides without having to worry about running out of time. Nothing was too small to look at in this setting. A set of tiny depressions in the sand at the bottom of the ocean was an interesting find. These were the marks that pieces of debris had left behind before slow-moving currents moved or covered them. By the time ROV cameras passed over them in 2023, light and dirt had made them almost impossible to see. The patterns came back to life thanks to AI's ability to boost contrast and find small changes in shadows. These ghost marks helped figure out where some pieces came from in the first place. The AI also found small scratches and impact marks on the Titanic wreckage that weren't visible in earlier video. These very small scratches, which are measured in fractions of a millimeter, show that smaller pieces of Titan had brushed against or hit the older hull after the explosion. In 2023, these tiny scratches were hard to tell apart from the Titanic's 100-year-old wear. AI showed a clearer picture of how far the debris spread in those last seconds by focusing on patterns that were consistent with a new hit. These results showed how smaller signs fit into a bigger forensic map. Number 1. The final seconds reconstructed. Researchers made a very thorough simulation of the Titan's last milliseconds using all the AI data that was available. This digital model put together environmental data, structure deformation scans, acoustic readings, and debris field maps. The restoration shows that the hull was under a lot of stress before it finally broke apart. It bent in places where older cracks had made the frame weaker. Inside, the 5 people were sitting in the same way they had been on previous dives. The way each person experienced the moments before the implosion depended on where they were sitting. The model not only shows the event, but also the steps that led up to it. Based on the modeling, the first sign of failure was likely a sharp, resonant crack in the carbon fiber shell. This sound, which sounds more like a snap than an explosion, would have happened moments before the whole thing fell apart. Almost right away, there was an explosive rush inward as pressure from the outside tore through weak spots. Within 30 milliseconds, the structure broke apart, sending out an explosion that blew out all the air inside. Before pain could be felt, the terrible change in pressure stopped all neurological action. A second clue came from AI analysis. A weak acoustic irregularity was picked up right before the hull broke. It's possible that a pin or joint broke under a lot of stress. If it could have been heard, it might have been the only physical sign the people got. Even though it was too short to run or do anything, that fraction of a second could have been the last time they realized something was wrong. A small thing like this makes an otherwise rapid event more complicated. AI not only models the implosion itself, but also the paths of its main parts. First, the titanium end caps came off, and then the carbon fiber shell quickly broke into thousands of small pieces. As the space collapsed, loose equipment, personal things, and structural bolts shot through the air at high speeds. This explains why so little was still whole, and why some things made it through in distorted but still recognized shapes. The simulation plays these events back one frame at a time, showing mechanical facts that people can't see in real time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Click on the next video popping up on your screen for more amazing content.